Leadership Story Talks, where we discuss the practices that engage, motivate, develop, retain, and attract people to businesses. We'll give you principles and tools based on real-world stories to leverage listening and storytelling to become a better leader and management professional. Leadership Story Talks is produced by Narrative, a company that focuses on personal storytelling for business.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. Hi, I'm Jerome CEO of Narrative.
Julian Ryan, nice to see everyone again.
And today we have a special guest. His name is Kevin Griffin. You may know him as an award-winning songwriter, producer, and performer whose songs have sold in excess of 80 million copies and been streamed over 1 billion times. He's best known as the singer and founding member of the platinum-selling rock band Better Than Ezra. He's written numerous number ones and had songs performed by artists such as Taylor Swift, Train, Sugarland, Dierks Bentley, Christina Perri, Hunter Hayes, James Blunt, and many, many more. He's a co-founder and partner in Pilgrimage Music and Cultural Festival located in Franklin, Tennessee, and he's served as a writer in residence at NYU's Clive Davis School of Music. Griffin lectures internationally on creativity to groups and companies ranging from Live Nation, Google, Spotify, and Disney to Nike, YPO, WPO, and Salesforce. He lives with his family in Franklin, Tennessee, and of course, he's here today because he's written a book called The Greatest Song, and I cannot wait to get into this. Really warm welcome to you, Kevin.
Thank you so much. I'm giddy to get going and on this beautiful day. The introduction, I have to give kudos to my PR person because it's like, wow, I have to really be good after that.
Who is this? Really? That's me?
He's amazing. Humble.
Well, I'm really excited to have you here, and I think it definitely does justice to your remarkable career and this book that you wrote, The Greatest Song, which kind of spans that, but you tell us the story through a fictional character. Which you do say, has lots of bits and pieces from your own life. But I'm curious, what was the journey for you from, hitting kind of the big time with Better Than Ezra and writing all these hit songs and then writing for others. So you went from that to then, as I understand it, kind of becoming a speaker in the business realm and then this book. How did that all kind of come together?
Well, at some point we all get to a realization in our lives, if you've been doing it long enough, that wow, I'm not an upstart in the business anymore. I've actually been. I'm a veteran. Because all of us, most people can agree. Like, wow, if at some point you were always the young person in the room, the upstart. What's he got or what's she got, and then suddenly you're a sage. In the business, and it was no different than me. Like you said, I started off with Better Than Ezra in the 90s, and I've been able to stay in the music business for a long time in a notoriously fickle business. And around maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I just started noticing more and more, maybe when the realization for me that I was a veteran in this business. I was getting asked more and more. I was noticing in my writes, usually, and this is my studio here in Franklin, that when I was working with younger artists, and they were always asking me, how I managed to stay in this business, and what have I done that a lot of my peers didn't do to stay inspired and nimble and creative and hungry. At the same time, around about that time, a friend, they say that nothing good happens in a bar after 2 a.m. and usually right, especially in New Orleans during Mardi Gras. But this one time, I had just finished writing in a Mardi Gras, and I talk about this in the book, in a Mardi Gras parade called the Hermes Parade. It's one of the oldest groups. They call them crews, Krewe. That just means group. That's what we call the group that holds the different balls, Endymion, Bacchus. This was Hermes. But I'd written in that parade, and I wanted some late night jambalaya, and I went to a place called F&M's Patio Bar, which is in uptown New Orleans off Chapatula Street. This is a very New Orleans type place. And I ran into a buddy, and a guy named Brady Wood, who is a serial entrepreneur. And he, after we both had the same idea, before we go to bed, let's get some food. The prudent thing to do after a long day of Mardi Gras celebrations. And it turned out that he was with his YPO group down in New Orleans, and they had hired Malcolm Gladwell to speak for them. And we know Malcolm well. I don't know him personally, but geez, I'm a big fan. And I was like, well, that's amazing. You're having this educational excursion. And he was like, yeah, why don't you speak for us, this spring? And I was like, my answer to everything in life is yes. Then I figure out how I live in the world of yes, how I'm going to pull it off. A few months later, I got a call from Brady and was like, okay, it's 2 weeks away. Are you ready? And I was like, wow, sure. And I had to spend the next couple of weeks thinking about, what have I done in my life, in my career, personally and professionally, to stay engaged, to stay inspired, to continue growing, to stay creatively, curious. And I realized there were things, and also at the same time, as I mentioned, different peers and stuff were asking me about that. And I came up with these 5 things that I realized, wow, these are actual things that I've done, that I've learned, through osmosis or came up with on my own. There's things that I do to stay successful. And I did that first speech to members of YPO. And I also realized that, these were successful men and women who would have sniffed out something that was me just riffing. On stage, you can just kind of, you can riff, and it's entertainment. But under the glare of no guitar and just a microphone, I had to do something that had some meat. And I did that speech, and it really resonated with people. And I realized in doing it that there were certain principles and ways to conduct myself, collaborating, and elsewhere that were not only germane to music, but any business, and not just business, but also life. And that began doing these speeches. And then a few years later, right before the pandemic, I started thinking about a book. I was an English major, graduated in English at LSU, Louisiana State University, go Tigers. And I'd written a book in the early 2000s that I was editing, and then the movie The Hangover came out.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot better. It was a lot better story of my fictional story, and so I kind of got discouraged. But fast forward to about 4 years ago, and my agent said, you need to put the speech into a story. And immediately I thought of one of my favorite things are business parables. I love my favorite songs. My favorite songwriters are songwriters that have a narrative. Dylan, Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie. They tell stories. That's and some of my most popular songs are stories. They involve, the band. They involve characters. My favorite books in business and self-improvement, whether it's Who Moved My Cheese or Rich Dad Poor Dad or even The Go-Giver, were those type of books. And my aha moment, most of my good ideas happen when I'm running, was I'll tell a story, and I'll tell a narrative about a journeyman songwriter with a little bit of me in it. And then that was really just then it just exploded, and I ran off, and I became the guy with a computer in the coffee shop. That was me. And here we are.
Yeah.
I love it, because when I started to read it, I expected in the beginning it was going to be an autobiography and some case study, like stories about background. And I love the way you took Joseph Campbell's the hero's journey, and to lay out your different concepts, and the simplicity that you put, that is not so simple when you start to work with these concepts, but just shared it in such an engaging way that it was a page turner. And I love that there's one particular section I love is when you talk about collaboration, when you're invited, when the character's invited to join the session and thinks it's going to be me, I'm going to own this, the studio. And then you capture the internal workings in such a wonderful way of the ego shift and the awareness that I have never seen written before. So I have to give you a fair bit. I know it's like around page 54. That's how much it impressed. Like, impressed what you wrote there. So
Oh,
yeah, you really got into the character in a
thank
great
you
way.
so much. You know, I wanted it to be a compelling read. So it was this, it was
Mhm.
a balancing act of like, I need to get these ideas across, and there has to be some structure to it, but I didn't want it to be this prosaic, do this kind of read. And so I wanted there to be drama. I wanted there to be heart and humor.
Mm.
You know, the enigmatic billionaire Sir Daniel Smith Daniels,
Yes.
which is such a ludicrous name with, you know, tongue firmly planted in cheek like Spinal Tap. Um,
Uh-huh.
but you know, the bedrock of the jumping off point for what changed my career is collaboration.
Mm.
You know, and you mentioned that that's the first, and just to broad strokes, in the book we meet Jake Stark as he's a very famous songwriter, as he's let go of his longtime publisher after a storied career. And in the same week, he meets an enigmatic billionaire, Sir Daniel Smith Daniels, only 28 years old, the youngest person to be knighted. And Sir Daniel wants Jake to be part of this boutique publishing house called The Row, provided he writes with these 5 different writers who will illustrate to him the 5 steps in this thing called the method. And the first one is collaboration. And that is, it's, you know, you write what you know.
Mhm.
All the success early in my career, it was just me. I wrote all the songs on those early Better Than Ezra albums, and it was great, you know. And then I got dropped in 2002.
Mm.
And just 7 short years after, you know, getting signed and being almost being on Saturday Night Live, being a Norm Macdonald joke, one of the classic Norm Macdonald jokes. He said famously, the #1 band on college campuses this summer was Better Than Ezra. #2, Ezra. That's a great Norm Macdonald. And when he passed away, that was in his top 5 bits.
Oh,
But
Wow.
so a lot of success, and then suddenly I was dropped, and I just turned 30, which seemed like old at the time, but now I'm like, oh, I was so young.
Mm.
And I realized that at first I thought about just leaving music, but I was like, no, you love music. It's your passion, but I have to do something different. And my father always would say to me, Kevin, nothing changes if nothing changes.
Mm.
And so I started studying producers who were crushing at the time. Max Martin, who had done Baby Hit Me One More Time, Britney Spears, all the way to today, working with The Weeknd or Miley Cyrus, and even Pharrell at that time with the Neptunes, but also business leaders. And around that time, I met someone who changed the trajectory of my life in 2002 at a studio in Los Angeles. We were at a place called Conway. Justin Timberlake was in Studio A, Better Than Ezra was in Studio B, and in Studio C was the man who would change my life, rock and roll icon, star of Rocky Horror Picture Show and Fight Club, Meatloaf.
oh my God.
And his man, it's amazing. It's just crazy to say, but this old guy, a guy named Alan Kovac, who's a famous music manager, managed Blondie, still manages Blondie, Motley Crue, the Bee Gees, and Meatloaf came up to me one morning and said, "Hey, Meat heard one of your songs and he'd like to collaborate with you." And my initial instinct was, no, I don't want to do it, because I was an army of one, and collaboration was foreign to me. But I did it, and it was such a great experience. And then other artists writing a single for Blondie and working with Barry Gibb, which is we'll have our own podcast about the Barry Gibb right. But then it opened, and suddenly my world exploded professionally, and so collaboration became the bedrock. So it's no coincidence that it's the first thing in the book that I talk about.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and it's great to also hear your process of how you came to this character, you know, and to hear your own kind of life inserted into it, because that was going to be one of my questions. And I guess I'll still ask it because I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. The choice to find a fictional character as opposed to putting yourself into the story fully, as a full kind of nonfiction. Did that sort of come about? I mean, it sounds like it was a pretty early decision. It's not like you had a first, manuscript that was all about you and your life,
Sure.
and you were the hero of the story. But pretty quickly, you made the decision to find a fictional character. Can you tell us about that choice of doing it that way?
I wasn't interested in doing a memoir.
Mm,
Uh, because there's such great rock
right.
and roll memoirs out there, and I'm just not going to. I've got some good dirt, don't get me wrong, but it's not Keith
It
Richards
wasn't
level.
supposed to be a tell-all book,
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't. And maybe one day I'll do that. So I loved books like The Go-Giver, that told a narrative. I love books like Who Moved My Cheese, like Rich Dad Poor Dad, and there's a lot of similarities about Jake Stark, who is the protagonist in the book. But there's a guy named Bobby Bones. He's a TV show host. You may have heard of him,
Oh,
big
yeah.
syndicated, hosts all the ACMs and the CMAs. I was hanging out with him. He goes, "So Jake Stark's a fictional character, big in the 90s, wrote a lot of hit songs. He's not you at all." And I'm like, "No, he's not." I go, "Look, every 90% of the Stephen King books you read start with a writer in Maine. It's
Mhm.
not Stephen King, but you do start off as a foundation." I was searching around for different ideas, and when I looked at the success of Who Moved My Cheese and those other books, and I was like, wait a second, Who Moved My Cheese has sold 14.1
I know,
million.
isn't it incredible?
It's 51 pages cover
Right.
to
Yeah,
cover, and the writing, let's be honest, isn't good.
yeah,
I can do this.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So that was really like, I always, I like following structure and being inspired, and having hallmarks to guide me in things, especially when I'm learning something new. I love like saying, "Hey, you did it really well. I'm going to use that
Hmm.
as the architecture about what I'm going to do," and that's something I talk about in the book. So when I was able to write this character and come up with this fictional person, Sir Daniel Smith Daniels, and Misha and Brit Kanuka and Shane Sawyer, who talks like, by the way, there is an audible audiobook version of
Oh, cool.
this that
Okay.
I do all the voices, and the music. Then it really became freeing, and I was like, wow, this is how I can tell the story. So I didn't want to do um, a memoir, and I wanted it to be fiction because my heart's in fiction. That's what I love to read. But if it's also given me some wisdom and some truth in it, then that's the best of both worlds.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, for me as a reader, it does remind me a lot of those books that you just mentioned. Where there is that device of you
Hmm.
follow one protagonist throughout, rather than kind of many characters, and it can get a little confusing. And it also gives you some freedom, I would imagine, as a writer, to be able to kind of come up with these different protagonists that are loosely based on people but it sort of gives you that through line. And I think for the reader, that really comes through. It's very, you read this book, and they're all the necessary conflicts and obstacles that you need in order to keep engaging
Hmm.
Sure.
with it. So I really appreciated that, and I was just curious what that process was. But the other question I was wondering about is the link between music and business. I mean, it sounds like you were a fan of these books even before you started to get into this world. But in terms of what you describe as those 5 practices, collaboration being one of them throughout the book, how did you sort of figure those practices out? And at what point did you sort of say music industry, business, there's a connection there, and we can make that connection.
Um, Nice question, by the way. Thank you. I realized when I was thinking about doing that speech, and then as I honed it and got better, and I've always haven't always just done music. I've always been, a seeker, maybe. to get involved with different things, whether it was a festival and stuff. So I've had exposure just to working with people and just non-musical pursuits. I realized that the tools that I've learned, and I had to learn in music, collaboration, filling the well, which is just that continuing education, with the idea that, you know, that as you get older, inspiration can't be a passive thing. It has to have intent, and you have to seek it. Changing my attitude, approaching a task from a different angle than you normally would. All these things that I do in music, wow, I do those in business. And when I do them, when I do it a certain way, that's when I've been successful. And so I realized through my journey that the truths in collaborating with people in music and staying inspired were the same truths that were in completely non-musical endeavors in business. It's really just how to work with people, how to check my ego, how to continue growing, how to listen, how to not micromanage, how to leave my comfort zone, how to dare to be stupid, you know, create an atmosphere where big ideas are encouraged and failure isn't stigmatized, you know. And so that was, you know, the aha moment. And then at the same time, truthfully, is that realizing, wow, the things, listening, changing my attitude, you know, my angle of approach on how to break a creative deadlock. When I do that in my life, in my personal life, with my family, with my wife, with my kids, that's when life got really sweet. And I realized that it's all connected. There's just truth. There are these lines that go through everything. And that's what I was trying to get across in the book, that it's every profession. The original book, as I wrote it, didn't have the part about Jake's wife and son. And when I finished it, I was like, it's missing heart. And it's not actually, and it wasn't really accurate or truthful, because how the things I've learned to do in my life through ups and downs have also applied in my personal life. So that's when I went and rewrote it and put the heart in the book. And that's when it really resonated, not only with me, but the agent and the publisher. So it was really just about, I had to live it. I had to make mistakes and fall on my face, you know, and go through these different things to have that epiphany that what I do in music is the same thing I do in other businesses. And when look, it's progress, not perfection, as they say. I all the time since I've written the book, I'm like, you need to practice what you preach. Just stop. Listen, Kevin. Don't try to micromanage. You know, so many of us want to control, and with good intentions. If only people would do what I wanted them to do, that things would be perfect. And you realize you're creating more chaos by doing that than solving problems. And so all of it conspired in the book as something like, hey man, this has worked for me, and there's wisdom that I'm culling from things that have inspired me. Let me share it in this book about this songwriter, and hopefully you can get something out of it. And the feedback has really been amazing.
Yeah,
I love it, because you can have obviously you had a structure you found, just like in music, you put a structure to how you wanted to write it, but it felt honest. And even it was a fiction, it felt very honest and true. It was coming from someplace, not just that you Googled, what's the 20 points I need to include in this book to make it a bestseller. And I love the fact that really counterpoints the work we do in story, because we talk about story beats when we're pulling a story together for somebody or listening to their story. And also, one of the things we do is we teach like the retelling of a story, to have the person's story told by somebody else, and how they experience their own storyline or all their traits. So I think there's so many parallels to what you did in this book to the work and how we look at storytelling too, which was the magical part. And then you brought a little magic to it, these characters that miraculously appear at the right time to do the thing. So I thought you had fun. And I think that takes a certain amount of soul to be able to do that, to just play and take the reader someplace and engage. So,
Well, thank you. And I've said this a bit. I've had the unfair advantage of being a songwriter,
mm,
and I learned early on that an idea as silly as wah, it was good, could turn into a song, could turn into something I perform with the band, turn into a recording, turn into a single, a hit, a career, a video, something that becomes part of bigger than you and becomes part of everyone's life as a song people hear and memories and stuff. And I've been able to have that repeatedly. So I knew that if I finished the book and wrote it, I knew that I could finish it, and I knew that where it could go. But I also realized that it had to have. Early on, I realized that despite all the noise in our lives these days, with so much social media, everything, the one thing, and it's proven true over and over again, that authenticity finds its way, it bubbles to the surface, and people react to it, and it just sticks on. It's super sticky. And so I was like, write your own story through these characters for what's worked with me. And with that authenticity, it will resonate with people. And that's one of the things that inspires me every day. You know, when I'm sit down, like in an hour, I'll be writing with a band, you know, and there's 1,000 hit songs written in Nashville, but I know, like, hey, let's just write our best song, make it authentic, and it comes to the surface. I always talk about Taylor Swift, you know, performing my songs. Those songs that she performed weren't singles. They were album tracks that we never performed, but somehow songs that are good and authentic and true bubble up. And so with that book, with the book, I knew that if it was just authentic and I told a truth, that it would resonate. And so.
Well, yeah, and you know, I'm glad that you brought this up, because something that we talk about a lot is, you know, that sweet spot where the personal meets the professional, and I've definitely come from a world, you know, where in end of 90s, early 2000s, I went to business school and then had a career track that was pretty much defined for me in finance. You know, I did that for 5 years until the nagging voice that was saying to me, you know, I think you want to do something more creative and meaningful here than
Right.
this. And not to knock on anybody who works in finance, but that was just for me. And one of the things that I was doing, nobody said to do this, but whatever was indicated to me, whether that was the culture of the company or the culture of the industry, was to sort of leave the personal at the door. And so it was very difficult. What I figured out many years later was that it was very difficult for me to be authentic, because, you know, I was just kind of focusing on the work, and I thought anything that's personal, creative, is not for this realm. And of course, I discovered many years later that that wasn't true at all, and that it's when you can bring those two things together that something magical happens, and that's where the creativity happens. And I really think that your book is a great example of that. I'm so glad you brought this up, because so many times we sort of have to really remind leaders that, you know, there are things in your personal experiences that would be so relevant to the change that you're trying to navigate right now. That's so hard. That thing that's happening between you and your kids, or whatever it is, but something maybe that was even during college that you realized, you know, you can bring that into here, because that message will resonate a lot more than showing a pie chart and saying, hey, here's where we were 2 years ago, here's where we want to go. That doesn't work so well.
You know, yeah, you know, one of the things in the book that Sir Daniel first says to Jake, and it's not one of the 5 practices of the method, it's practicing contrary action. You know,
I love that.
We're creatures of habit. We knee-jerk reactions to everything, and usually not to our benefit. You know, I don't feel like, in the book, Jake, you know, initially somehow his radio station gets turned to the pop station, and like most older songwriters, you hate all the new stuff. Why can't it be like the old stuff? But he says, no, practice contrary action. I'm going to listen to it. And it changed, and something in the song he hears changes his life. When on Sunday morning, when his wife and son want to go hiking in Percy Warner Park, he does not feel like doing it, but then he hears that voice, practice contrary action, you know, and all through the book, you know, just talking about how, you know, I think there's a reason I put the Picasso quote at the beginning of the book, that we're all born artists. The challenge is, how do we stay artists as we get older? You know, or put another way, how do we grow into our creativity as opposed to out of it? That's what the book is about. That's what, you know, how do I continue growing? 'Cause I mean, I don't believe, and this is true, it's shown in my life, I don't believe in just a second act or a third act. You know, it's a fourth and a fifth act, and I'm always inspired by people who I just follow, who continue to reinvent themselves, and you know, I think that that we can all learn. You know, what I found is, you know, my career in the music industry, people are able to apply it to the finance world, you know, and all these different companies I speak to. You know, I don't think that Picasso was saying that we're all going to be Damien Hirst sawing sharks in half, or Jackson Pollock doing drip paintings. What I think is that all of us are creative animals, and we bring creativity to our daily tasks. And that if what can help one person stay creative, a songwriter, can also help other people stay creative and inspired. And part of that are those personal journeys. And it's all connected. You know, when if you've had a bad day in the morning with your family, you know, and you take it into work, guess what? It affects the work. It affects how you interact with your coworkers. Yeah. You know, it's all connected. And that's part of what I wanted, the tools, you know, contrary action, check your ego at the door. You know, my ego is not my amigo. All these things, it's all connected, you know. So bringing those personal stories, those things that are happening in your life into the workplace, there's a way for it to be applied.
Yeah. I love this.
Sorry, was that a long-winded answer?
No, not at all.
No, but it's very good.
I apologize. I keep looking for a pen to come up.
No, you're good. You're good. I haven't seen it either. I wait for that too. But we are getting towards the end of our time together, unfortunately, because I feel like we could go on for a while. But there is a question that we ask of all of our guests, and it's kind of in this realm that we've just been talking about, you know, personal, professional, and how those lines kind of get blurred and how it's all connected. And that question is that, is there an experience, and it sounds, from reading the book and hearing you now, I'm sure there's many, but for the sake of this exercise, would love to hear from one experience about a time that really has shaped who you are today, sort of continues to shape who you are today. Is there an experience you can tell us about that still sort of influences you and informs your thinking?
I think that for me, these different things kind of conspired at a point in my life. It was around about 2014, and I was having success in my life, but I was really being driven by self-will, and you know, I really truly believing that it was all about me pulling up, you know, the bootstraps. And I was seeing patterns repeat in my life over and over again that weren't healthy for me, that wasn't making me happy. And I realized that I had this aha moment with a good friend that I needed help. And it goes against, if you're a successful person, or at least you think you are, but you know, there's a tough irony that you have to overcome, or a contradiction in terms that it shows strength in surrender. And I was doing things in my life. I was getting in this ring with this 800-pound gorilla that was kicking my ass every time. And when I finally realized that there was a lot of strength to say, I'm just not going to get in that ring again. And in order to do that, I need help. I need help from friends. I need help from things that I want what other people have. So I took off this yoke, this illusion that I had, and I see in a lot of friends that I'm exceptional, that I'm different. And when I realize I'm just another person walking this earth, and what works for you, what can help you can help me. And I'm sure I've got my talents, but I'm not an exception. I'm just the same. And so, that was a point in my life where, like, hey, I'm just a person that needs help. I need to reach out. I need to say, hey, I need help. I can't do this on my own. That's when my life just really opened up. I never would have been able to write this book if I hadn't had that point in my life. So really saying, I need help. I'm not bulletproof. I need to check my ego. I need to check my self-will and be teachable. You know, being teachable throughout my life is just about what I strive for. So let me learn, you know, let me learn. I want what you've got. And again, it's all back to ego. But so is that a vague enough answer? But was really, you know,
that's an excellent answer.
Because, you know, just that I've gotten so much stronger and so much better by saying, I need help. And in seeking it out and being teachable. And that was the real gift for me.
Yeah.
Probably it's not
wonderful.
Say.
Right. No, I love it. And I'll tell you that, you know, I always look for nuggets to leave our listeners with at the end of an interview with each guest. And there are so many. I've just been writing down as you were talking and giving us your answers to various questions. It's you know, so there's so much there, and really thank you so much for
Guys, thank you for having me.
yeah, and for writing this book, because I think it really does give a kind of unique perspective on, you know, this connection between the creative self and the, you know, quote unquote professional sort of, even I'll even say corporate self, because I do think
Sure.
that people who work in these bigger companies and whatever size company you work in, but I feel like there's a lot there that you can take away, especially when it comes to your own growth, you know, both personal and professional. And sort of that answer you just gave us now, you know, keeping your ego in check and the self-will, and just keep working, keep growing, keep learning. It's such a great takeaway, and the book really does it in a way that's super specific. So we follow this character, you know, throughout, and we see how he's struggling with it. And I felt that it was very relatable because I see my own struggles there. And even in hearing your answers now, yeah, that's something I have to remember as well, you know. So yeah, it's there's lots of takeaways here.
Oh, well, thank you so much. You know, and I wanted, you know, I was part of, you know, being able to finish the book was figuring out what was the payoff at the end, the greatest song. You know, it's not an M. Night, is it M. Night Shyamalan? What's his
Shyamalan, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm getting it wrong. It's not Sixth Sense level payoff, but it's pretty good. I would say if you're interested in the book, a good way to dip your toe into it, you can just listen to the songs from the book. You know, that there's 5 fictional songs were written in the book, and I thought it would be fun. Hey, let's actually write those songs. And I collaborated with people. And those you can go to the Greatest Song soundtrack on Spotify or wherever you listen to music, and it's free.
Wow, that's
wonderful.
awesome.
Check it out. But this has been such a pleasure. And I'm so, when I hear your questions, I'm like, oh, it came across, it worked. And so thank you so much for that. I had such a blast writing the book, and the feedback has really been amazing.
I have one comment to make, and it's coming out of conversations that I've been having with potential clients, and ChatGPT is top of mind with many, especially in the creative world. And you really gave a gift to our listeners and to ourselves about the power that you could not be, you are not the result of an algorithm. Your collaborations, your insights came from life experiences about being teachable, taking risks, showing where you maybe need to make new choices. And I think this is the message we need to get out there. There's a power to technology, but there's a power to the person. And then this conversation really shows that.
Absolutely. And look, we can go down, the talking about I see, if we have a minute, I see both sides of the chat GPT AI. On one hand is the first thing people are doing is saying, how does it threaten songwriters? Because I can tell it hasn't happened yet. The songs that have been written by AI and then synthesized Eminem or Drake's voice have been okay. That's going to change in the next year or so. A song will be written by AI, maybe having a real person sing the melody, sing the song, but a song will be written by computer that will be owned by a tech company. And a lot of those companies that own the chat GPT and stuff, they're also owned by the record labels. So on one hand, it's terrifying that songwriters will be more marginalized than ever by AI generated music. At the same time, I was talking with a guy named Sam Hollander, who has a huge hits, Hand Clap for Fits and the Tantrums, High Hopes for Panic at the Disco. He uses Chat GPT all the time for lyrics. Like write a first verse, write a second, write a chorus, then get Chat GPT to write the second verse and use that as a tool. And what it showed me is that every time, because I saw Napster and Sean Fanning come and go and all these things, what I've found is that, it becomes the wild west with a new type of technology, but without fail, there's new income streams come from it, new challenges, and, a whole new world opens up. So I think the humanity will continue there. You just have to navigate it. But ultimately, I think it'll just be another tool we'll get to use.
Terrific. And thank you. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, we could be talking about AI for a while too, but that's a great succinct way to put it, that the humanity always finds a way to.
It does. But I'm a tireless optimist. So
yeah. What else can we be? That's that's the way to look at life. Well, again, thanks so much, Kevin Griffin. And I'm going to remind our listeners that the book is called The Greatest Song, and you can find it on Amazon and anywhere you find books, really. And like Kevin was just mentioning, go check out those 5 songs that were written for the book.
Absolutely.
And we will have a bunch of links and resources and connections to anything that we talked about in this episode, in the episode's show notes. So be sure to check that out as well to dig deeper into any of these topics. And in the meantime, what I want to do now is thank you again, Jules, for being my co-host. It's
always happy and always delighted to be here.
Acknowledgement is a big part.
Conan O'Brien. I mean,
that's right.
Man and Johnny Carson.
That's great. I love it. And I want to remind our listeners to go to narrative.com and arativ.com to find this episode and many other ones, and our blog and many other resources. And if you've been inspired by this session, you can also join us on September 7th, when we're going to begin a 3-part online workshop series around listening and storytelling for leadership. And you can go to Narrative again, and that'll help you find a link on how you can find, craft, and tell a powerful leadership story of your own in a safe and supportive environment. And Jules, I know you've got a few things to say too.
And if you prefer to enroll yourself and your team in private sessions, feel free to visit our website for information, and we will work with you to help you work with your teams and your audiences. So we're ready to listen all the time.
Great. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a review, because that helps the word of mouth, and we can get this wonderful interview out there to many more people. So until next time, thanks again, Jules, and thank you, Kevin, for being with us today.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.